The email came in at 6:47 in the morning. I know the exact time because I was already awake, sitting at the kitchen table with my second cup of coffee, watching the light come through the window the way it does in October, slow and pale, like it's not sure it wants to be there. I'd been up since 5. Old habit. 31 years of getting to the job site before the crew meant my body never learned how to sleep past 5, even now that the job site was behind me. My phone was face up on the table. I wasn't looking at it. I was just sitting there, the way a man sits when the house is quiet and he doesn't have anywhere to be. Then it buzzed. I picked it up, saw my wife's name, Donna, and figured it was something ordinary. A grocery reminder, a question about dinner, something small. I opened it. "Walter, I need to let you know, Tyler and I talked last night, and we all agree it would be better if you didn't come to the wedding. There's going to be a lot of family there, and it would just be easier. I hope you understand. We'll celebrate with you when we get back." I read it twice. Then I set the phone down on the table, very carefully, the way you set something down when your hands aren't fully steady, but you don't want anyone to know that. The coffee was still warm. I picked up the cup. I put it back down without drinking. "We'll celebrate with you when we get back." I sat with that sentence for a long time. Tyler was my wife's son from her first marriage. He was 26 years old, and he was getting married in 11 days to a young woman named Kayla in a venue I had booked, at a reception I was paying for, with a band I had personally driven 40 minutes to audition because Tyler said he wanted live music and not a DJ. I had been in Tyler's life for 9 years. I married Donna when he was 17. He was quiet at first, guarded, the way boys are when a new man comes into the house and they're not sure what to want from him. I didn't push, I just showed up. I came to his high school graduation. I drove him to his college orientation because his biological father, a man named Greg, lived in Phoenix and couldn't make it, or didn't try to, which is a different thing. I helped Tyler move into his first apartment. I co-signed on his car when his credit wasn't there yet. I didn't do any of it to be owed. I want to be clear about that. I did it because Donna loved him, and I loved Donna. And somewhere in those 9 years, something that felt like family had grown up between us, quiet and unannounced, the way things grow when you're not watching for them. Or so I thought. The venue was booked under my name. I had put down a deposit of $4,000 in March. The catering was through a company my former business partner recommended. I'd called in a favor to get them a Saturday in October, which is not easy to do. The flowers were ordered. The hotel block for out-of-town guests was set up through an account I managed. I had written a check for the rehearsal dinner the previous month. All of it was in my name, or ran through me because Greg, Tyler's father, had offered to help and then gone quiet, the way Greg apparently did with most things that required follow-through. I knew all of this when I sat at that kitchen table reading Donna's email. I don't think she had thought about any of it when she wrote it. I didn't call her. She was already at her sister's place across town. She'd gone the night before to help with some pre-wedding preparations, she'd said. She would be there most of the week. I thought about calling. I picked up the phone twice. Both times, I put it back down. There's a kind of clarity that comes over you sometimes when something painful happens. It's not anger exactly. It's more like the fog burns off and you can see everything very plainly. The shape of things, the distances, what's actually there, and what you'd been telling yourself was there. I'd felt it once before, years ago, the morning I realized my first business partnership had quietly been draining money for 8 months. That same clean, cold stillness. I sat in it for a while. Then I got up, refilled my coffee, and went to my desk. My first call was to the venue coordinator. Her name was Patricia, and she'd been easy to work with all summer. I told her I needed to cancel the booking. She asked if everything was okay, with the practiced gentleness of someone who has heard this before. I told her it was a family matter. She said she understood, and that given the notice, 60% of the deposit would be returned per the contract terms. I said that was fine. My second call was to the catering company. My contact there was a man named Dennis. I apologized for the short notice. He asked if there was any chance we could postpone rather than cancel. I said no. He said he was sorry to hear it, and he'd process the cancellation and send over the paperwork. I called the florist. I called the hotel and released the room block. I sent an email to the string quartet I'd hired, a polite note explaining that the event had been canceled and that I'd honor the 20% kill fee in the contract. Each call took less than 10 minutes. The whole morning took less than 2 hours. When I was done, I poured the rest of the coffee out in the sink, went upstairs, and started packing a bag. Not because I'd decided anything dramatic. I just knew I didn't want to be in that house when the phone started ringing, and I was fairly certain the phone would start ringing before the day was out. I called my brother James, who lived about 90 miles east, near the river. I asked if I could come stay for a few days. He asked no questions, which is one of the reasons James is the best person I know. He just said, "Doors open. You remember how to get here." I left before noon. Donna called at 2:15 in the afternoon. I saw her name on the screen and let it ring. She called again at 2:22. Then Tyler called at 2:31. Then a number I didn't recognize, which I suspected was Greg, or possibly Kayla's mother, who had opinions about most things and had never been shy about sharing them with me. I drove with the radio off. The highway took me through flat farmland, and then into the kind of small hills that people in this part of the country call mountains without embarrassment. I had the windows down. It was cool enough that it didn't make sense to have them down, but I wanted the air. James was on his porch when I pulled in. He handed me a beer before I got to the steps. We sat there until it got dark, talking about nothing in particular. His garden, a problem with his truck, a fishing trip he was thinking about taking in the spring. He didn't ask me why I'd come. I didn't explain. That's not how we are with each other. Some things get said in their own time, and some things don't need to be said at all. That night, lying in the spare room, I stared at the ceiling and tried to locate the thing I was feeling. It wasn't grief, exactly. It was something quieter. It was the feeling of having been shown something true, something that had probably always been true, and understanding that you can't unsee it once you've seen it. I thought about the deposit check I'd written in March. I thought about the day I'd driven Tyler to college orientation, the two of us stopping at a diner off the highway because we were both hungry and neither of us had thought to eat before leaving. He'd ordered a patty melt and talked about what he thought college was going to be like. He was nervous and trying not to show it. I remember thinking that this was what it felt like to be a father, or close enough that the difference didn't matter. I thought about that for a long time in the dark. Then I thought about the email. It would just be easier. Easier for whom, I did not know. Donna arrived at James's house the next afternoon. I don't know how she found out I was there, probably called my brother, who I suspect told her the truth because James is constitutionally incapable of deception, which is mostly an admirable quality. She came alone. She parked behind my truck and sat in her car for a few minutes before she came to the door. James let her in and then found somewhere else to be, which I appreciated. She sat across from me at the kitchen table. She looked tired. Her eyes had that particular quality that eyes get when someone has been alternating between crying and trying not to. She said, "Walter." I said, "Donna." She said she was sorry, that she hadn't been thinking clearly, that Tyler had been anxious about the wedding and about Greg coming, and there had been a conversation that had gotten away from her, and she'd sent the email before she'd thought it through. I listened to all of it. I did not interrupt. When she finished, I said, "Who paid for the venue?" She looked at her hands. I said, "I'm not asking to be cruel. I'm asking because I think it matters. Who paid for the venue, and the catering, and the flowers, and the hotel block? Who drove Tyler to college orientation when Greg couldn't make it? Who co-signed his car?" She didn't answer, and I hadn't really expected her to. The question wasn't about the answer. It was about whether she'd thought about it. I needed to know if she'd thought about any of it when she wrote that email, or whether I simply hadn't factored into the calculation at all. The silence told me what I needed to know. I said, "I've canceled everything." She looked up. I said, "The venue, the catering, the flowers, the hotel rooms. I called everyone yesterday morning. It's done." She stared at me. She said, "Walter, the wedding is in 10 days. "I know," I said. "Kayla's family. There are people flying in from—" "I know," I said again. "I imagine it'll be complicated to sort out." I said it quietly. I wasn't angry. I was tired, in the way you get tired when you've been carrying something heavy for a long time and you've finally set it down. Not relief exactly, but the strange lightness of empty hands. She said, "How could you do that?" I thought about how to answer. I said, "Donna, you sent me an email telling me not to come to a wedding I was paying for. You didn't call me. You didn't sit across from me and have a conversation. You sent an email at 6 in the morning while you were at your sister's house, and then you went about your day." She started to say something. I kept going, not loudly, just steadily. "I have spent 9 years being part of this family. I have shown up for Tyler in ways his own father didn't. And I want to be clear, I didn't do that to keep score. I wasn't storing it up. I did it because I cared about him and I cared about you, and I thought that's what family does. But what you showed me with that email is that when things got complicated, when there was a choice to make about where I fit, the answer was that I didn't. Not really." Donna was crying now, quietly. I said, "I'm not the villain of this story. I'm also not the wallet. I don't know which one you thought I was, but I'm neither." She went back to her sister's house that evening. We weren't done. There were conversations still ahead of us, the kind you don't finish in a single afternoon, but for that day, we were done. James made dinner, pork chops and some kind of rice situation he'd been experimenting with. We ate at the table and talked about a ball game. He refilled my glass without being asked. Outside, the trees along the river were just starting to turn, the edges of the leaves going red and orange in the way October does things here, slow and then all at once. I'm not going to tell you the wedding happened the way anyone planned, because it didn't. I heard later, through the particular grapevine that exists in every family, that there were several urgent phone calls, that Greg made some promises he was unable to keep on short notice, that Kayla's mother said things that could not be unsaid, and that the event was eventually scaled back considerably from what it was supposed to be. I don't take satisfaction in that. Or maybe I take a small amount of satisfaction in it, and I'm old enough not to pretend otherwise, but I don't dwell on it. What I think about more is this: nobody called me to ask for help. That was interesting. That told me something. Tyler called me about 3 weeks later. It was a Sunday morning, and I was back home by then. Donna and I were in the early, careful stages of figuring out what came next, which is its own kind of work. I was in the garage when my phone rang. He said, "I want to apologize." I said, "All right." He said he'd been overwhelmed, that Greg coming had stirred up things he hadn't dealt with, that he'd said some things to his mom in a moment of stress that he hadn't meant to say, or hadn't meant to land the way they did. I listened. He said, "You've always been there. And I think I took that for granted. I'm sorry for that. I didn't say it was fine, because it wasn't, entirely, but I said, I hear you, Tyler. I appreciate you saying it. We talked for a little while longer. It wasn't easy and it wasn't resolved because real things rarely are. But it was real. That counted for something. After I hung up, I stood in the garage for a while. There was an old workbench along one wall that I'd been meaning to refinish for 2 years. I looked at it. I thought about getting started on it right then, just to have something to do with my hands. There's a thing I used to tell my crew back when I was running job sites. Young guys, mostly, who would get frustrated when a project wasn't going the way they'd planned, when the materials were wrong, or the weather turned, or something that looked solid turned out not to be. I used to tell them, you can't build on a bad foundation. Doesn't matter how good your framing is, how straight your walls are, how well you've done everything else. If the foundation isn't right, the house will tell you eventually. It always does. The only move, when that happens, is to go back to the ground. Clear it. Start again with something true. I've been thinking about that a lot lately. Some mornings I still wake up at 5 and sit with my coffee and watch the light come through the window. The house is quiet. My hands are still. And I think about what it means to be present in someone's life without being invisible in it. About what it means to love people well, including yourself. About the difference between being patient and being taken for granted, and how sometimes those two things can look identical from the outside for a very long time. I don't have a clean answer. I'm 63 years old and I've learned to be suspicious of clean answers. But I know this. There is a version of dignity that doesn't announce itself, that doesn't make speeches or demand recognition. It just knows its own value, quietly, and when the time comes, it acts accordingly. I pulled the workbench out from the wall, got my sandpaper, started with the corners. That's where you always start, with the corners. Get those right, and the rest has a chance. If this story touched something in you, something you've felt or seen or lived through, I'd like to hear about it. Leave a comment below. Tell me where you're listening from. Tell me what you're carrying. We're all just trying to build something solid on ground that doesn't always hold still. And if you know someone who needs to hear this today, share it with them. Sometimes the right words find us right when we need them. I'm Walter. Thank you for being here with me.